a una personalidad que es la doctora Barbara Barzansky. Espero haber pronunciado correcto el nombre. La doctora Barzansky tiene su de grado en biología molecular de la Universidad de California. Ella hizo un postdoctorado en el departamento de anatomía de la misma Universidad de Wisconsin y se encuentra sirviendo en la misma facultad en el departamento de anatomía y del sur de California. La doctora obtuvo el grado de maestro en educación para la salud y obviamente actualmente es co-secretario de la Liason Committee of Medical Education, que para fines prácticos obviamente se encarga de la parte de acreditación en los Estados Unidos y obviamente tiene una gran respetabilidad y obviamente acciones que están relacionadas con el esfuerzo a la iniciativa de la transformación de la educación médica que ustedes han recibido información. Solicito a la doctora Bárbara el uso de la voz. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much for your assistance.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here to give you one example of a model of accreditation. You've heard about the Mexican system. There are going to be some similarities and maybe some differences, and hopefully that will contribute to the discussion that we have. I want to talk about three things very briefly. One is to talk about the Liaison Committee on Medical Education itself as a committee to give you an idea about how the process works in the U.S. To talk about how we get our schools and our surveyors ready for the accreditation process, because that's really critical in the kind of accreditation process we have. And third, to talk about how accreditation can maintain quality but still allow innovation. And that also is very critical in the United States because, as you'll see, our schools across the United States are very, very different. The LCME is based in the private sector. It's over 70 years old, and it was formed by collaboration between the American Medical Association and the Association of American Medical Colleges. And they had each been accrediting medical schools for a number of years. Before they decided to get together, they thought it would make more sense to not do it twice, to do it once with a single set of standards. So we accredit medical education programs leading to the MD degree in the U.S., and our collaborator, the Committee on Accreditation of Canadian Medical Schools, represented by Dr. Monod, will talk to you about how that linkage works. But we also, although we don't accredit outside the United States, we do support quality assurance activities in a number of places in the world, and my colleague and co-secretary, Dr. Dan Hunt, will be talking about that tomorrow. The LCME is a private sector peer review organization. It has 19 members. 14 of them are medical school deans or associate deans or senior faculty from U.S. medical schools. They are elected by the LCME, but they are nominated by either the Association of American Medical Colleges or the AMA. We have the chair of the CACMS, the Canadian accrediting body. We have 2 medical students who are voting members, who are senior year medical students, and 2 public members, people who have no ties to medical education or medical care, and they're there to give a public perspective to make sure that the LCME doesn't forget that the role of the LCME is to protect the public. We have no government funding. This is a private sector organization, and up until this year, the AMA and the AAMC paid all the bills. They employed me, they employed Dan Hunt, and they paid for all the activities of the LCME. We are moving slowly to capture some of the costs of visits and other accreditation activities. The LCME is managed out of offices at the AAMC and the AMA. And this would not be an ideal system for you to mirror, but it's the history. Because accreditation started before the LCME was formed, the AAMC and the AMA each have a stake in it. Each think it's important. And so there is a staff at each office, and there are other set people who are involved And the duties to manage the LCME are divided between the two offices, and so we really have a virtual secretariat, a virtual office. Schools in the United States have what we call a full survey every 8 years, which means they're reviewed according to every accreditation standard. And they, as we'll see, spend a lot of time preparing for that with their own internal process. And if schools have areas where the LCME identifies a problem, where they're not in compliance with standards or there are some gaps, there are follow-ups, so that a school found to have problems must show that it is correcting these problems in a reasonable amount of time, and it may do that through a written report, or it may do that through a focused additional survey visit. But the idea of quality assurance means that there's review, there's feedback, and then there's follow-up to make sure that problems are corrected. In the past, when a school had an accreditation review, it produced, I'd say it's about 1.5 feet of paper to show its evidence that it is in compliance with accreditation standards. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried to pick up 1.5 feet of paper, but it's very, very heavy. And so the LCME has moved to a slightly different system and a different process to support the ability of schools to provide information. As I think was mentioned in the last talk, we have now approved just a few months ago 12 accreditation standards, and under them there are 95 specific elements that schools must meet, 6 to 12 elements per standard. And it used to be we had 132 individual standards where schools had to supply information for each. And that really led to a lot of duplication, a lot of paperwork, and the fact that schools were providing us with 1.5 feet of material. So the new approach that the LCME has come up with is clustering relevant areas together so that curriculum content has been organized under one standard. Curriculum management and evaluation has been clustered under one standard so that schools could synthesize and provide consistent information and wouldn't have to duplicate, and survey teams wouldn't have to go searching for information among 132 standards. And the other thing we've done to kind of get away from this is to have an online system for schools to both prepare and submit information. And what's interesting about this is that it helps schools get ready because it allows information that they've supplied previously, trend data, a number of students, trend data on certain areas of student satisfaction, to be pre-populated into the questionnaire that schools submit. And so we've tried to reduce burden, we've tried to reduce duplication, we've tried to make things more consistent and easier for everyone to deal with. Whoops. Whoops, where is slideshow? Okay, we'll keep going. All right, what are the LCME standards like? The LCME standards have very specifically and very over time been non-quantitative. There's only one number in the 132 standards, and that has to do with the number of weeks of instruction. So, for example, the number of faculty, schools have to submit information around a standard that says medical school must have a certain number of faculty with the qualifications and time to deliver the curriculum and to meet the needs and missions of the medical school. How many is that? And it's going to vary depending on the type of curriculum and other kinds of things that the school's characterized by. So deciding if a school is in compliance with this standard is based on knowing what would be needed for a particular kind of medical school. And that openness, that lack of quantitative requirement affects how we select and train surveyors, how we prepare schools, and how the LCME itself is prepared. Okay. Standards themselves are developed with a consensus process that allows a lot of groups and individuals to have something to say about what those standards are. So there's written comments when a new idea for a standard is submitted. There's written comments. There's an open hearing. There's a lot of time for the different groups to discuss what a standard should be. And so the peer review and open process starts at the very beginning for standards. The implications of non-quantitative standards, the fact that you don't have numbers or ratios or things that every school must have. It allows differences across schools, but it requires training of everyone. It requires that the schools be oriented. It requires that the people who make the reviews and make the decisions are also prepared. And so this becomes a very big activity of the LCME Secretariat and of others involved in the accreditation process. We have 141 new medical schools, and of them, 15 were accredited in the last 7 years. So there's a lot of activity. There's a lot of change going on. Those schools differ in a lot of characteristics. Community-based schools have the goal of usually preparing people for practice, often for primary care, where research-intensive schools prepare academic physicians who will be doing research. There's large schools and small schools, schools in cities, and schools very much in the rural areas. The curriculum varies, and some schools, in fact a number of them, have campuses located at quite a distance from where the main medical school campus is. All these introduce differences which need to be taken into account when you judge the quality of the medical school. Survey team members are peer reviewers. They're people who know the U.S. system of medical education. They're medical school administrators and faculty. They're people who've been on a lot of visits, who are new and who are just learning the system. And they're chosen, at least in part, based on the characteristics of the school that is going to be visited. And so every 8 years, a school gets a survey team, and that survey team is developed specifically for that school. And if it's a community-based school, there'll be people who know about community-based education, so they'll be able to apply the standards to that specific type of school. We train them. We train them a lot. There are workshops, there are webinars, there are written materials, there's on-site mentoring. There's a lot of ways that we make sure these survey team members are prepared in order to understand standards, but also to go to the particular kind of school that they are visiting. The LCME has found in recent years that more and more schools have had what we call negative outcomes, which is they have to have a probation decision, which is a public negative action. They're still accredited, but they are publicly said to not have been in compliance with a serious number of standards. We have a warning category which says you're out of compliance with certain standards. If you don't fix it very quickly, you may have a probation decision. And so we've had to prepare schools for this new environment where they're more than we'd like of them are finding they have problems. So one of the things we've done, and I think it relates back to what you heard before, is that we have a new standard that requires schools to engage in continuous quality improvement related to compliance with standards between these 8-year visits. Schools have to show us that they're paying attention to their compliance with standards, because that's one of the main reasons that there's more negative actions. Schools just haven't been paying attention. They haven't known what to do, and if they found out that they're having a problem, they haven't had time to fix the problem. So medical schools have regular orientations. They get all sorts of preparation. The secretariat staff supports these schools. We have monthly open call-ins where anyone from a school can call in, and we usually have about 100 people. And all our documents are available on the LCME website. So we try to be transparent. We do the same thing with our survey teams. We train the LCME, we train the survey teams. The professional secretariat, Dan Hunt and me and our 2 colleagues go to schools to help them and work with surveyors to get them ready. We are either an LCME member or one of the secretariat staff is on all survey teams to make sure that there's consistency in application of standards. And again, all the documents are available to everybody. So in summary, our accreditation system is designed to be a quality improvement process to identify areas of noncompliance and to make sure they're fixed, to broadly involve members of the medical education community, administrators, faculty, students, make sure everyone understands what the expectations are and is ready to support quality. And our non-prescriptive standards allow innovation and allow differences across schools, but we require training of everyone to make sure that everyone understands what's expected and everyone has no question about what's needed. And with that, I thank you very much. Okay.